Hello Internet, I'm Jackie Fox. Today I'm looking at the ice element and telling you about all the units that we have in global. And by the time I release this, we should be about to get Reagan here. I'm not really going to talk about Ice Howlet, but just know that we have another ice slash unit coming in the near future. And that good lord knows when this lady's getting her 140. She's kind of stuck at 120 for us right now. I think maybe not. I don't know. I don't remember if she got a 140. I didn't pull her, so whatsoever. So let's talk about Reagan for just a second here. So he's got some resistances, got some healing power up, and acquired AP up, resistance, reaction block rate. And then on his big... So this reminds me quite a bit of Führer's Wrath. This top part here is Bradley's big fuck off passive. And then this, instead of giving him AP cost down, he gets 50% HP restore when his HP is below a threshold. Okay. Could have got that a little bit more translated, but it'll be fine. One thing that's going to be pretty interesting about him is that he's going to get moves that are going to give him Wind and Ice Killer. He can dispel Courage, but also that he gets Fire moves. Now this is not nearly as cool as you think, because he's going to be losing a lot of like ice attack up and that kind of thing in order to use this. It's only really useful in ice versus ice matches. So if he well, I don't know that it would have been cooler for him to be a fire unit with ice moves either. But I guess this makes him okay in mirror matches. I don't know. As far as gimmicks go, I don't think that this is the most impactful thing. But some of this other stuff on this move is cool. So generally speaking, he's going to do pretty good consistent damage. He's going to have some tank busty abilities. He gets decreased slash resistance on a single target, so instead of slash penetration like Bradley. So there's some parallels with Bradley. He has a self-heal, so he's probably a little bit more durable, but probably a lot less damaging. He doesn't have the CT up shenanigans, but he does have well, arguably a less impressive gimmick, really. But, you know, if we're comparing every unit to Bradley, everybody's going to look bad, right? Especially limited, non-limited units such as this, because he's going to be in the regular pool, even though he is a pretty awesome looking daddy. So let's switch over to global. Oh yeah, we got Zoma. With Zoma, the most recent ice unit. Wow, it's been a drought for ice. It's my ice part of my Earth account had to go dormant. It's been such a drought. But Zoma is interesting because unlike most units, not a human, so human killer does not apply. That's kind of a niche thing, but there are units that really rely on human killer, especially drain force units, to pump their damage. So Zoma kind of gets around that. Has good non-elemental single target damage that can really slap, but also the ability to decrease bravery and do a whole bunch of other shenanigans, but also having big AoE moves. He can really mess with people. Strong unit, but probably not one that many people pulled. Also another glove unit that might be able to work into maybe like fire glove teams as well. But unfortunately, probably not getting a 120 very soon, and not coming back if you don't have him. So we're gonna overlook him for a second. Has not gotten a 140 yet, so I'm kind of gonna skip over her a little bit because I'm not really sure when we're getting her 140. She's a great sword user. She's pretty accurate. She has some other shenanigans in her kit, but I don't tend to be big fans of winter units, especially. So I skipped her, and by the time she's relevant, she might not even be as relevant as she was in JP, and that wasn't super relevant, so I don't know. I'm just gonna not bother. I think the reason that she was a little bit better in JP, and that's mainly because, you know, once you get the next two slash units once we get into like Ice Howlet territory, maybe she has kind of a modernized team to run with. But again, that's thinking that we get a winter re-collaboration in the middle of fall just to keep timing with it. I don't think that's going to happen. So I don't know that she's going to be super relevant super soon. Alaya Rundle is a 100 cost normal pool unit, and when she came out, shortly after Glaciella came out for Wind and became the roughly the strongest unit in the game, Alaya came out and became the strongest unit in the game. And a big part of that is she has a really strong counter that has the drawback of reducing her move by 1. Now, she is a gunner, and a very long range gunner at that. So actually reducing her range keeps her out of the range of enemies while being able to utilize her long range, and really like she's almost like an artillery unit, like a ballistic unit. So she can really apply some pretty hefty debuffs and a whole lot of heavy damage. Some not the biggest AoEs, maybe even not as big as some of Eliza's, but she does have Ranger sub, so she has access to Sharpshoot for guaranteed hit single target moves with a high range, and Barrage for high damage, high range, high AoE moves. So she really has a fuck off kit and really knows how to use it, and it's hard to screw up her AI because, you know, she's limited in how far she can move forward. And that's actually a benefit specifically to her and to gunners, and something I hope that we see on some really awesome gunner passives in the future, because I'd like to use it on another unit. Snow was like the unit that showed us what a better modern 120 tank could be, and is still a strong tank in the 140 era, and in about 5 months, 4.5 months, something like that, he is going to be an incredible 140 strike tank. He has courage, he has a threshold heal, he has a guaranteed hit single target move that removes buffs. He has a close range cross AoE move that increases his defense penetration, so even as a tank, he has the capability to do quite a bit of damage. Getting healing power up on him can also be quite impactful, because that threshold heal can really put him back up to a high level of HP and really make him kind of indomitable in a lot of fights, especially if you have a good healer support with him. McLeod is probably one of my favorite free units that you can always farm. He's a Trick Lancer, which gives him quite a bit of range and accuracy. Really powerful moves for for pierce damage, and also good chances for critical, and a potential for immobilize, which can be a real benefit to missile-based teams. Also, double gunner as his sub-job gives him access to a lot of kind of mid-range moves, equal in range really to a lot of the stuff that he has in Trick Lancer, but that are missile-based, which means that he can start chains as more of a vanguard unit, while your ice-ranged units pop off on those chains from a distance and from a bit of safety. I'm not saying that he's necessarily tanky or even a brawler. He's an MR unit, so that really detriment to his survivability, but you know, he can get out in front and do some stuff. And if your ice rangers are picking units off, he's not running into as much opposition. He can survive a lot longer than you might think. Speaking of picking people off with long range damage, it is the other half of the ice gunner or ice missile combo, Eliza. She is a hunter main job, which gives her access to a bunch of really cool debuffs, the ability to reduce CT in a box shape, a 3x3 box, which is quite powerful, especially combined with the Thornlet, because then you're reducing their CT and their agility all at once on a critical hit. She's good at getting critical hits, so the Thornlet works well on her. Also, it's kind of easy to run her no guard. She's not durable at all, but hopefully as a ranger, she's staying back. And this could also be a reason to run maybe something like the Producer's Bowtie on her to give a similar effect to Alaya's heavy ballistic artillery, whatever, that reduces her movement. She also has access to the same kind of barrage and sharpshoot in Ranger. And in some cases, especially when she can get high up on a map and attack someone who's lower down, she can have a bit more range even than Elia. And personally, even though generally Elia is the preferred missile unit if you're only going to run one, I personally like the flavor of Eliza a lot better. And she's getting her awakening first, so I'm super happy about that she will maybe be the better of the two, more definitively, at least for a while. Velis is a 100 cost Ice Warrior of the Crystal unit, and my boy is one of the best, if not the best, supports in the game. He has a big AoE heal that gets back a lot of AP as well, so it really energizes your party to keep blasting. He has one of the best versions of haste in the game, which hastes himself and someone else, targeting both of them. A lot of the AoE hastes that hit like 5 panels in practice don't do that. They hit maybe 1, maybe 2, so this is pretty reliable. It also means that he can haste the entire team in 2 turns instead of 3, and that's a big difference for the AI. Not necessarily a lot of damage, but he has that kind of scholarly, devoutly naturally high resistances to where he's just kind of a beefy support. Again, not really tanky, not really brawly. You probably want to keep him away from damage, but he can take a hit or two. Rafal is the selection quest unit. She is an assassin main, want to say like sniper. Lot of strong single target damage. Potential for evasion, potential for good movement, kind of like a ninja, but not as much so. More focus, a little bit more focus on damage and debuffs than raw speed and evasion. Not one of my favorite units, but she's not terrible, and I think she's going to get better as AoE resistance becomes more common, but since selection quest units don't have LBs, it's hard to really justify them unless they're quite good being compared to other UR units. Ariana was from the Final Fantasy XV collaboration. She should be coming back with Pixel Remaster, so that's not bad. She is a high accuracy, high damage Dragoon. So she has pretty good movement, especially pretty good jump. So uneven maps are going to be good for her, and she's going to be going up into the air and taking somebody out. That's kind of how she works. Barrett is kind of a brawling mid-range tank-esque missile unit. It's a little confusing, a little bit mixed up, maybe not the best respect for Barrett. He's not bad. He's just kind of outflexed by the other ice missile units. He could be good as a pseudo tank in a full ice missile team if you don't have snow, but most of the ice tanks are probably, I don't know. He can chain better, so I guess that is a feather in his cap. He's not unusable, and he does have a 140, so not bad. Velis is a Nightblade. His gimmick is that his Drain Rush is a great chaining move that heals him like a truck. So if you can't take him out quickly, he can be hard to take out if he's healing himself back. It's kind of like Drain Force on crack for him, but there's not a... I mean, he has solid jobs. He is a solid unit. He's not weak necessarily, but he doesn't have a ton going for him. Like some of the older Ice Slash units, and like some of the older Ice units, if I'm being honest, feel a little bit held back in some ways, a little bit more fragile than they could or should be. If you were a little less fragile, I think you could really benefit from that Drain Rush a bit more, but it is what it is. Sweetheart Salir is a limited energist. I think the Sweetheart units are generally pretty good. They're not they're power scaled just above what I think some of the holiday units are, even though they're kind of the same concept, and they do end up in the normal pool instead of a limited pool. So I just generally like them better than the other holiday units typically. Like an Energist, she's going to be for shorter fights, she is going to be able to punish evasion in an AoE, and she's going to have pretty high magic damage, with potential for evasion, but not necessarily a brawler herself, and a bit of a mid-range in terms of range, but also bringing magic and missile attacks to the fight. Aren is our tanky zombie boy or ghosty boy from Final Fantasy X. He has one of the many flaming ice limit breaks. He's not, like, after having played Final Fantasy X, he's nowhere near as beefy as I would like him to be. But he does kind of live up to the other aspects of his legacy from Final Fantasy X, while also being a bit of a lackluster ice unit overall. He's not bad, but he's not ever really been super impressive for me. Rosa is a bit of an odd unit. Probably similar most to Relugia, except that she is a lower cost, I want to say an 80 cost unit. The one feather in her cap over Relugia is having like proper white mage, I believe, or having full life in her main job or something to that effect. So she is a bit stronger and more capable as a support than him, but she is an awkward mix of support and range damage, which don't really work out well in auto, but could potentially be quite effective in manual. I don't know, maybe more of a thinking player's unit. Shell was at a time one of the fastest units in the game and one of the fastest casting as well. Neither of those things are still true to my knowledge, but she is good at both of those things. And she's fairly quick for an MR unit as well. She's also a time mage, so all of these things lead to very, very fast quickens. Stats wise and just other general things that she does, there's not a lot more to write home about. She's the fastest Quicken in the West, and look, Quicken is very impactful even when everything else about a unit sucks, because Quicken bots can be effective, and if you want one of the faster Quicken bots in the game, that's Shell. Also, if I'm not mistaken, her Trustmaster... Oh, well, I don't think, in the age of +6 weapons, having 2 passives like that isn't as impressive as he used to be. Lastwell's pretty cool. He has Mirage, which allows him to negate 1 hit fully, magic or physical. That's pretty neat. He's getting upgraded pretty well. He's maintaining a dedication to accuracy and critical, so kind of following that samurai-esque ethic of I will take you down in 1 shot that shall not miss your vitals. To a bit. So he can do really surprising damage, and he can do really accurate damage, and he can hit criticals pretty reliably. Yeah, he's a pretty good unit. He is a bit older though, but what I will say is that he often makes his way into limited content alongside Victoria, who has a very similar shield automatically due to, I think, her master ability too, which was a great upgrade for her, and makes them an interesting team because that can allow them to close the gap enough that they can really devastate someone. And their biggest issue previously was being able to close that gap, because neither of them are big on the survivability necessarily, with Victoria especially being a glass cannon. But if they can get in your face, they can take you down quite often, and especially in limited, they can definitely do that. Agrius has probably the most potential among ice tanks to become a generalist tank, but that also kind of makes her a master of none. She is kind of special in that, or a little bit conflicted in that she probably is best suited for being a magic tank, but at the same time, there is a good argument for running her with a higher than normal faith for a physical unit, because one of the more impactful things that she does is some of her statuses, like stop and confusion, which can be really impactful, but a little bit harder for her to maximize for than, say, a mage, because she naturally wants her faith to be lower, but as a status unit she would want it to be higher, and as a magic tank she would also probably want it to be lower. So a little bit of a conflicted unit that hasn't necessarily aged well, but she had a time and place where she was absolutely devastating, and I think she has potential if they went a lot harder on magic, on like, if they just gave her a lot more spirit to where I felt very comfortable running her faith at full. Maybe not necessarily intent on making her a magic tank, but giving her enough spirit to counteract the increased magic damage from having high faith, then, you know, just allow me to kind of counter that out and run her at a high faith without worrying that I'm making her critically weak to something. That would be great. I would really appreciate that, because I think that would be a fun playstyle for her. On the other hand, we have Freyevia, who is a lot more suited to being an anti-magic tank, or an anti-magic attack tank, but also a bit of an anti-magic tank. But also she has abilities that raise her spirit and defense simultaneously that are stackable and pretty powerful, so she can be a little bit of a general tank as well. She has a little bit more supportive of AI, and she has the white mage sub-job. Unfortunately no Curaga, but she does have Curada, Raise, and most importantly full life, and it can be pretty cool to have a tank that can fully restore one of your units, because naturally if the team gets wiped, she's the most likely to survive, and if she survived, one of the best things she can do is maybe bring your DPS back to life, so you might be able to win this thing. Victoria already kind of talked about her. One thing I want to add to her combo with Laswell, one of the things that can make her devastating at close range, even if she doesn't get off the high damage or get her critical hits like a lot of Dragoons aim towards, she's fairly accurate, kind of like a lesser version of a lot of the things I described for Aranea, except one of the real benefits for her is her LB has AoE Charm, which can sometimes make her even trickier to play against than Sodley. I believe his LB is a single target charm, so this could charm a whole team, which is just pretty devastating. Nasha is an MR tank. She got an early reincarnation upgrade, and MR tanks especially get a lot out of reincarnation and being reincarnated a lot, so maybe a little bit niche, but if you are building for Ice Limited, maybe this is a tank that you want to consider. But we've talked about a lot of different options for ice tanks, so maybe not, I don't know, but she would be easy to reincarnate a lot for you, and she is a pretty sturdy tank. All things being said, if that's the way you want to go for limited. Gilgamesh was one of the first 100 cost units. He hasn't aged particularly well. He has an interesting gimmick in that one of his moves is truly hybrid, which is cool. It also reduces slash attack resistance and removes re-raise in a diamond AoE, which is pretty awesome and can be really hard to plan against. The thing is, it gives him a really mixed stat line. There's not a lot of things to support a true hybrid unit, and a hybrid unit like himself. Hybrid units in this game often kind of get the short end of the stick just because there isn't equipment that is kind of brokenly suited to them. Although I think the Bloodsword might actually work pretty well for Gilgamesh in the future. I'm still not sure that's going to be enough to bring him back. He's really going to need some love in a future update somehow, but not the worst unit, but not really worth the 100 cost investment, and not really worth that 100 cost place on your team in most cases. Medinia is terrible. She was awesome at the very beginning of the game, and now she is trash, pretty much. She falls to a stiff breeze, which shouldn't even be possible because she's an ice unit. She resists wind, and yet still falls to a swift breeze. And the thing is, she, I don't know, even in her heyday, she was more of a suicide bomb. But you still want to build her to 120. She is our free unit, and the reason you do that, you get yourself a horn. Free UR horn. Although in the future, if UR horns get easier to get, it might not even be worth it to do this, because there is really no other upside to building her to 120 except that maybe her TMR is okay. Curry Wazette is actually a pretty good MR unit. He is kind of like, he's a ranger, so he's, something like a discount Eliza in a lot of ways. He's got a barrage that can apply frostbite, and that is really bad for people when it lands. So yeah, he can be a pretty mean ranged unit for limited cost applications. Surges is not a unit that I've really messed with. He's a lancer slash potentially a spear chuckery guy. I really don't want to know what to say about him. Haven't invested in him. Don't necessarily recommend it. On the other hand, Valade, as I've started re-examining lower cost green mages and the way that they have been willing to give them really strong buffs to make up for the fact that they're otherwise kind of bad. So, if you give a terrible unit, a terrible support unit, great buffs, does it make it a moderately good unit? I think so, actually, at least in specific cases. And the ability to get magic, attack, agility, wind resistance, and ice resistance all on the same move? Wow, that's pretty badass. And then let's stack that fully stacks with protect, accuracy, ice attack, and reaction block rate. And then as a support, and especially if you turn off his damage move so he doesn't attack, you can completely keep people from targeting him so that he can just be casting this on people non-stop, so they constantly have all of these buffs by getting decreased hate 4. I think this guy has a lot of potential if you invest in him, at least in very specific compositions. He is a more limited unit to keep your eye on, in my opinion, even though he is desperately weak to snakes. Just saying. Anyways, with that being said, see you in the next one.